Good morning. It is Tuesday, February the 20th. This is Ron. Welcome to Storytime. And this morning I continue with part two of chapter one of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy Who Needs It? And in chapter one, we were left off talking about that not all philosophies are evil, but that you need to know basically all the what philosophy has to offer, even the philosophies that are wrong for to be able to defend yourself and go ahead and in defense of, like she said, truth, justice, freedom, and any value you've held or will ever hold. If you feel nothing but boredom when reading the virtually unintelligible theories of some philosophers, you have my deepest sympathy. But if you brush them aside, saying, quote, "Why should I study that stuff when I know it's nonsense," unquote, you are mistaken. It is nonsense, but you don't know it. Not as long as you go on accepting all their conclusions, all the vicious catchphrases generated by those philosophers, and not so long as you are unable to refute them. That nonsense deals with the most crucial, the life or death issues of man's existence. At the root of every significant philosophical theory, there is a legitimate issue. In that sense, there is an authentic need of man's consciousness, which some theories struggle to clarify and others struggle to obfuscate, to corrupt, to prevent man from ever discovering. The battle of philosophers is a battle for man's mind. If you do not understand their theories, you are vulnerable to the worst among them. The best way to study philosophy is to approach it as one approaches a detective story. Follow every trail, clue, and implication in order to discover who is a murderer and who is a hero. The criterion of detection is two questions: why and how. If a given tenet seems to be true, why? If another tenet seems to be false, why? And how is it being put over? You will not find all the answers immediately, but you will acquire an invaluable characteristic: the ability to think in terms of essentials. Nothing is given to man automatically, neither knowledge, nor self confidence, nor inner serenity, nor the right way to use the mind. Every value he needs or wants has to be discovered, learned, and acquired. Even the proper posture of his body. In this, in this context, I want to say that I have always admired the posture of West Point graduates, a posture that projects man in proud, disciplined control of his body. While philosophical training gives man the proper intellectual posture, a proud, disciplined control of his mind. In your own profession, in military science, you know the importance of keeping track of the enemy's weapons, strategy, and tactics, and of being prepared to counter them. The same is true in philosophy. You have to understand the enemy's ideas and be prepared to refute them. You have to know his basic arguments and be able to blast them. In physical warfare, you would not send your men into a booby trap. You would make every effort to discover its location. Well, Kant's system is the biggest and most intricate booby trap in the history of philosophy. But it's so full of holes that once you grasp its gimmick, you can diffuse it without any trouble and walk forward over it in perfect safety. And once it is diffused, the lesser Kantians, the lower ranks of his army, and philosophical sergeants, buck privates, and mercenaries of today will fall of their own weightlessness by chain reaction. There's a special reason why you, the future leaders of the United States Army, need to be philosophically armed today. You are the target of a special attack by the Kantian Hegelian collectivist establishment that dominates our cultural institutions at present. You are the army of the last semi free country left on earth. You are accused of being a tool of imperialism and imperialism is the name given to the foreign policy of this country, which has never engaged in military conquest and never profited from the two world wars, which she did not initiate, but entered and won. It was, incidentally, a foolishly overgenerous policy which made this country waste her wealth on helping both her allies and her former enemies. Something called, quote, the military industrial complex, unquote, which is a myth, or worse, is being blamed for all this country's troubles. Bloody college hoodlums scream demands that ROTC units be banned from college campuses. Our defense budget is being attacked, denounced, and undercut by people who claim that financial priority should be given to ecological rose gardens and to classes in aesthetic self-expression for the residents of the slums. Some of you may be bewildered by this campaign and may be wondering, in good faith, what errors you committed to bring it about. If so, it is urgently important for you to understand the nature of the enemy. You are attacked, not for any errors or flaws, but for your virtues. You are denounced, not for any weaknesses, but for your strength and your competence. You are penalized for being the protectors of the United States. On a lower level of the same issue, a similar kind of campaign is conducted against the police force. Those who seek to destroy this country seek to disarm it, intellectually and physically. But it is not a mere political issue. Politics is not the cause, but the last consequence of philosophical ideas. It is not a communist conspiracy, though some communists may be involved, as maggots cashing in on a disaster they had no power to originate. The motive of the destroyers is not love for communism, but hatred for America. Why hatred? Because America is the living refutation of a Kantian universe. Today's mawkish concern with and compassion for the feeble, the flawed, the suffering, the guilty is a cover for the profoundly Kantian hatred of the innocent, the strong, the able, the successful, the virtuous, the confident, the happy. A philosophy out to destroy man's mind is necessarily a philosophy of hatred for man, for man's life, and for every human value. Hatred of the good for being the good is the hallmark of the 20th century. This is the enemy you are facing. A battle of this kind requires special weapons. It has to be fought with a full understanding of your cause, a full confidence in yourself, and the fullest certainty of moral rightness of both. Only philosophy can provide you with those weapons. The assignment I gave myself for tonight is not to sell you on my philosophy, but on philosophy as such. I have, however, been speaking implicitly of my philosophy in every sentence, since none of us and no statement can escape from philosophical premises. What is my selfish interest in the matter? I am confident enough to think that if you accept the importance of philosophy and the task of examining it critically, it is my philosophy that you will come to accept. Formally, I call it objectivism, but informally, I call it a philosophy for living on earth. You will find an explicit presentation of it in my books, particularly in Atlas Shrugged. In conclusion, allow me to speak in personal terms. This evening means a great deal to me. I feel deeply honored by the opportunity to address you. I can say, not as a patriotic bromide, but with full knowledge of the necessary metaphysical, epistemological, ethical, political, and aesthetic roots, that the United States of America is the greatest, the noblest, and, in its original founding principles, the only moral country in the history of the world. There is a kind of quiet radiance associated in my mind with the name West Point, because you have persevered the spirit of those original founding principles, and you are their symbol. There were contradictions and omissions in those principles, and there may be in yours. But I am speaking of the essentials. There may be individuals in your history who did not live up to your highest standards, as there are in every institution. since no institution, no social system can guarantee the automatic perfection of all its members. This depends on an individual's free will. I am speaking of your standards. You have preserved three qualities of character which were typical at the time of Americans' birth, but are virtually non existent today: earnestness, dedication, a sense of honor. Honor is self esteem made visible in action. You have chosen to risk your lives for the defense of this country. I will not insult you by saying that you are dedicated to selfless service. It is not a virtue in my morality. In my morality, the defense of one's country means that a man is personally unwilling to live as the conquered slave of any enemy, foreign or domestic. This is an enormous virtue. Some of you may not be consciously aware of it. I want to help you realize it. The army of a free country has a great responsibility: the right to use force, but not as an instrument of compulsion and brute conquest, as the armies of other countries have done in their histories, only as an instrument of a free nation's self-defense, which means the defense of a man's individual rights. The principle of using force only in retaliation against those who initiates its use is the principle of subordinating might to right. The highest integrity and sense of honor are required for such a task. No other army in the world has achieved it. You have. West Point has given America a long line of heroes, known and unknown. You, this year's graduates, have a glorious tradition to carry on, which I admire profoundly, not because it is a tradition, but because it is glorious. Since I came from a country guilty of the worst tyranny on earth, I am particularly able to appreciate the meaning, the greatness, and the supreme value of that which you are defending. So, in my own name and in the name of many people who think as I do, I want to say to all the men of West Point, past, present, and future, thank you. And that is the conclusion of Chapter 1 of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy Who Needs It. And the title of the chapter is Philosophy Who Needs It. And again, she makes the mistake, the error in there of talking about philosophies as though they were possessions of people. There's Ayn Rand's philosophy. There's Hegel's philosophy. There's Kant's philosophy. There is Sartre, etc., etc. There's no such thing. Philosophy means the love of wisdom. So we are all philosophers, and we all may have and definitely operate under various philosophical theories. But we do not have our own philosophies. As I've said, when Ayn Rand created objectivism, she ceased to be objective anymore. Her mission after that point was to promote and to defend her ideas, her point of view, rather than approach philosophy from an objective standpoint and look for what is true, what is false, what is right, and what is wrong. And what that has a tendency to do when you become subjective about issues such as philosophy is that you have a tendency to become rigid and dogmatic. And Ayn Rand's, at least her followers, are exactly that, rigid and dogmatic, without a doubt. So tomorrow is going to be another Storytime Extra, and I will be reading another chapter from Philosophy Who Needs It on Thursday. So until tomorrow, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.